With that said, let's jump into what we are here for, and that's a topic which is really close to my heart. I think trust is an ephemeral thing. Yeah, trust to me is the basis of all human relationship. Uh, Trust or lack thereof, if I may say so. Yeah, and I'm very passionate because I feel the world has got very, very complicated and very complex simply because I think somewhere we've lost our ability to trust. Now, you may say, Ajay, there is a lack of trust in society at large. But my point here is I'm not here to solve world food hunger. I'm here to examine this issue along with you in terms of the business relevance and what is the impact of trust in terms of business performance. Yeah? And why is it so critical? Why do we want to talk about this subject? I think Mr. Kavi, and I'm sure a lot of you may have gone through some of his work, has very, very well structured this whole thing, saying that there are multiple manifestations of trust. Um, and as each level, and it starts from inside out, uh, the resonance and the impact is truly dramatic. Um, so trust needs to be at a level of an individual, which is our own confidence, our own capability, uh, our own faith in ourselves, in the fact that yes, we can go and make a difference. Um, all the way to our relationships, to how we go and organize, how we go and contribute to the organizations that we work in. And that starts radiating out and starts becoming manifest in our market dynamics, and at an overall level also starts impacting societal trust levels as well. And so the way to go and fix, if you were to say that, hey, there is a trust deficit in society, I think the journey has to start with it. The journey has to start with you. The journey has to start with me. What am I going to do really to make sure that we start evolving and start moving in the right direction for this to become really manifest in every element. Now, let's, it's, like I said, trust is ephemeral. Everyone has a different understanding, but to make sure that we all have a common understanding of what we're talking about here, here is a very simple definition out of the dictionary. It says a willingness to put yourself at risk based on another person's actions. Yeah, so I think there are a lot of things that go in. We are what we are as a summation of the life experiences that we've had. And that defines hugely your ability to trust and not to trust, or what situations would you trust whom. But lots of different elements, and we're going to touch upon some of these. But you start seeing that when we look at it in an organization context, elements like expertise and how well are we aligned in terms of business direction, or what is it that we want to achieve as an organization, start becoming very, very important. And they are really a big contributor to this whole journey that you would do in your organization of building an environment of trust, because there is a very strong business case for trust. Because a lot of you may be thinking at this point in time that, yeah, is that really so critical in an organization? Yeah. So we'll just have a quick look as to what is the business case for trust. I mean, why should you all as business leaders, part of business organizations, pay such heed to this issue? So here is the business case, and this is a study which was done about 2.5, 3 years back, 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And this was across 290 global organizations, 520 leaders were polled, and a lot of data crunching was done, a lot of research was carried out, and it brought about some very, very startling figures in terms of how trust manifests itself in terms of business. Okay, so basically the idea was to really look at organizations which have high trust, and basis a few empirical methodologies, a few dipsticks into organizations. One started to look at what is happening in low-performing companies and what's starting to happen in high-performance companies. And typically, on a global basis, a simple definition of a high-performance company was anyone who recorded 5% or more business growth. And conversely, low performance organizations are the ones who were below this threshold. Now, interestingly, the results of the study clearly brought about the fact that trust has a huge, huge business impact. And the business impact is very clearly visible in high performance companies delivering a very, very different business result. Yeah. So low performance companies, this was really the mix of what companies lay in this whole stack. And the idea was, the high performing companies are where there is 5 to 10% improvement or more than 10% improvement in terms of business results, whereas low performance companies are below this threshold as I shared with you. Now, when you stack this together and you start looking at what is starting to happen in companies which are high performing, you realize that organizations which have a high trust have a very high performance. As simple as that. Organizations where trust levels were higher had more than 2.5 times the ability to deliver higher business results. So basically what we're saying is that companies where trust was at a low level, there were only 15% companies who really grew as high performing companies. They really delivered in the high performance category. But companies where trust levels were higher, 40% of them delivered better than that, better than expected results, or the 5% threshold and more. Yeah. So I think it is very, very clear that there is a strong business case as to why organizations need to be very focused in terms of looking at this aspect. It has a direct impact in terms of your ability to deliver better results to every stakeholder. And as I said, and we will talk about a few statistics on that, that if the organization is delivering better results to its stakeholders, remember the employees, all of you are also stakeholders in the organization. And therefore, people are a lot more happier in organizations where there is a high trust level rather than organizations where there is low trust level. I'll give you a moment to think of this, in the course of the day, today as well, you're at work. Weekend's coming up, so that's good news. How does it feel when you are able to work with a group of people or engage with a group of people who you trust more? Versus think of instances and circumstances and situations where you had to work with people who you don't trust. How does it make you feel? Does it energize when you're working with people who we don't trust? Do we have confidence in our ability to deliver what's supposed to be delivered? At the end of the day, when you're working with people who you don't trust, do you feel excited? More importantly, next morning, do you feel excited to go back? And that, I think the answers that you have in your mind are really the reason why this is such a critical issue for businesses to focus on. We feel de-energized, we feel worried, we are watching over our back, we don't know who's doing what, people are not sharing information, people are hiding facts, communication is poor. And my fundamental belief is that an organization is structured in such a manner that people in an organization need to collaborate with each other. And collaboration is possible only if there is a level of trust. In my experience, no organization can deliver results if people in the organization do not collaborate. How can finance, sales, manufacturing, support functions, legal, work in their own islands and not connect with each other and collaborate? And if they don't do so, will they ever deliver any value to their customers? Now, if that has to be done, that can be done only in an environment where there is trust. So look at your organization, look at organizations around you, look at organizations where your friends work, colleagues, social network works, and you will find that organizations that are good, where there is high degree of excitement, high degree of engagement, are organizations that there's a high level of collaboration. And that collaboration comes out as a result of trust levels existing in the organization. So that really is a very, very strong reason for us to take trust very seriously. And trust is a key element in any organization's culture. Some of you who may have been on a prior webinar in which I was there would certainly remember one of my favorite, quotes, which is from Mr. Drucker, where he says that, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. And a key element of culture is really trust. Lots of other elements define it, but to me the story starts with trust. So let's look at what this really is all about. So there are two dimensions when you go into the workplace, right? There is a dimension of what is it that you want to achieve, what is it that you want to contribute, I've told a lot of people who work with me that, the day you don't feel excited about coming into work, and if this were to happen, 3 days in a week is the point in time when you should really start thinking about whether you want to work in that organization or not. So what is your intent? Is your intent to come in and contribute to the best of your ability, or is your intent, to do a job, get in there, clock your time in, clock your time out? So intent is a very critical thing, and the first two are really around the person's personal elements, which is the character of people in an organization. And the other element of that is really the integrity. How honest are we and how committed are we to what we want to do? So intent starts getting the wheel moving, and then integrity starts building momentum to it. When you add capability to it, these are more workplace competencies and, whether one can do one's job, one can evolve to the next level. When this comes into play and organizations focus significantly on this in terms of getting capability going up, that's when you truly start delivering results. That's really how results come out. So I think these core aspects have to be thought of as you run your businesses and look at how you are evolving people in your organization, getting them more engaged, more challenged, and more excited. What are we doing around these core areas of trust? So it's a bit like, saying that, listen, if I don't have, if the intent is there but integrity is not there and capability is there, you can well imagine what kind of results we can start driving. Now these three have to come into coexistence for you to start delivering, like I said, sustained superior performance. So that is a very, very important aspect of it. And you've got to start realizing that there are very clear trust behaviors that are there. I think I've talked about this a little bit earlier as well. This is what is known as the RAINA, RAINA model, trust model. This is done by a couple, Dr. Michel Reyna and Dr. Getting the name of the gentleman, Dennis Reyna. And they used to, interestingly, not work in the corporate perspective. They used to work with specially able children. Now, I'm a bit of an atheist, I don't know, or a bit of a skeptic, or maybe a little bit confused. But, at times God or whoever makes children wires them wrongly. And, so they used to work extensively with these specially able children. And while working with these specially able children, they realized that it's not one single element of trust. Okay, trust is not one homogeneous lot. There are different kinds of trusts. And you would have noticed that in one of our earlier slides as well, where we talked about competence, where we talked about some of those elements, right? So it starts with the issue of competence trust, which is capability. And then there is communication trust and there is contractual trust. Now the interesting thing is that all these three have to play in consonance. Okay, so let's look at it that let's say you go in for a new job or you're hiring somebody. What do you hire basis when you get a new person? Your first base is really analyzing whether the person has the capability and the competence to bring to the workplace. Depending on the role, that's why you have a job description, you have a competence matrix to it, and you say, hey, does this person possess those competencies or does he not possess those competencies? Then what you do is, if you think that yes, there is a match, you go ahead and do some contracting, which is your letter of employment. It could be for you or it could be for somebody you are hiring. And that has all the terminologies and what is it that you will get for what you do, blah, blah, blah. There is a contract being established. So it's still all trust, right? And then you communicate it to the person and you start to get to work, right? Imagine if one of these elements is missing, would the rest of the story even begin? Yeah. I like the competence of a guy, but I don't give him a contract. Will he come and work for me? Now, how did Dr. Michelle Reyna and Dr. Dennis Reyna, come into the world that we were talking about? Interesting. They used to work with these little children. Let's take a case of how it played out in their environment. So let's say there was a child who couldn't walk. Okay. The first thing you need to validate is whether the child has an inherent competence to walk. No neurological issue, no physiological issue. The basic capability to walk does exist. So you assess the competence, and once you've done that assessment, that yes, there is no reason why the child should not be walking, you go to the child and say, hey, listen, child, if you walk 3 steps, I'm going to give you a candy or an ice cream or whatever. So you do the communication and then you do a contract. You do this 3 steps, I do this, the ice cream or the candy. So you do competence evaluation, you do the communication, and you establish a contract around it. Let's say the child walks 3 steps. You can hope that you can come back the next day and say, okay, child, today you walk 5 steps, and then is when you get your candy. But imagine a situation where you did not meet the contractual part. The child walked 3 steps and you did not give the candy or the ice cream. Do you think the next day you could come back and ask the child to really walk even 1 step? So that's where it came about that, all of these 3 have to be in play at all times. And how the relevance to corporate came in is because if you look around in corporate entities today, you realize there is a big gap in terms of the same trust issues. We are all in a manner specially able. If I'm in finance, I think in this company, finance guys do a super job. It's the sales guys who are terrible. If I'm in the frontline sales function, I'll say, we are a great team. We do awesome stuff, but our finance and our legal and our product guys don't support us. If I'm a product guy or an R&D or a manufacturing guy, I say we put in sweat, blood, toil into making sure that we get the products out when you require them, but our sales guys are pathetic and, any which ways finance is not managing it well, and that's why the profitability of the company is low, and therefore we get paid less. If this is the kind of environment we have, there is not much that we will achieve, and that's really the core issue around trust, how it decimates the ability of an organization to actually go ahead and deliver performance. So that's really what it is all about. Now the interesting thing is, while they were working, they also realized that there are a few things that you could do to start building trust. So here is a very simple primer for some of you who may have attended earlier. I think I've shared this earlier as well. I'm going to populate all the elements together, and I'm going to ask you, what is the rocket science in all of this? Is there really any rocket science at all? Yeah. Be consistent, keep agreements, share information, tell the truth, admit mistakes, give and receive feedback, acknowledge other people's skills and capabilities. Is that difficult? Is that not what we are supposed to do? But the issue is, how often do we do it? That is really what you got to ask. So I think that's where the problem is, that these basic behaviors are not being exhibited in our workplace, causes a lack of trust, and the moment you have a lack of trust, you actually have a big issue in terms of delivering business performance. So that's really the whole, dimensions around it. And there are some very interesting stories. I mean, I think trust in organizations and more importantly in leadership is such a critical thing, which makes a difference between an organization really growing and scaling and building. And remember, it has to grow because of its own plans and actions. Please remember, oftentimes you say, oh, the organization is growing, but is it growing because the tide is rising? Or is it growing because of its inherent value that it is bringing to the marketplace? So I think it's a very interesting example, and I think sports is an interesting example. That you've got to really go out of the way. I mean, if you really want to build trust, for those of you who are cricket fans, they would love this story, and I know some of you may know it as well. This was the Golden Jubilee Test being played in Bombay in 1980. Okay, and Kapil Dev was bowling, and he bowled to Bob Taylor, and Bob Taylor was caught behind. Vishwanath, if you recall, used to be at the slips, and he was captain. Gundappa Vishwanath did not captain too many test matches, but this was one of the matches where he was captain. And he felt that it was possibly not a snake. So, and India were not in a very, this wicket would have been a great thing. I think England would have gone on to become 86 for 5, if I'm not mistaken, or 85 for 6, and would have set us up very well for the match. But he went and asked Bob Taylor that, do you think you really nicked it? Bob Taylor said, no, I didn't nick it. Vishwanath went to the captain, to the umpire, and requested the umpire to change his own decision. I remember about 3-4 years back, a similar incident occurred when MS Dhoni did a similar thing. He recalled a player who was given out because he thought he was not out. Interestingly, Vishwanath was, when he did this, we lost the test, by the way. But look at the conduct and look at what confidence and what lesson are you sending to the team. So this is very, very interesting as to how trust manifests itself into every single domain. And I think, I'm very passionate about this game as well, and I feel the level of respect you have for the person changes, and you're willing to do a lot more for the person than you would otherwise. And that's the same thing with business leadership. Companies have often demonstrated this at very high cost. And one of the most interesting example is, for some of you who would remember the times when Intel had the Pentium chip that came out. Now, actually this problem apparently was detected by a scientist who was working on prime numbers. So the Pentium processor was really the big transition. It was a very innovative thing that happened at that point in time. But the scientist was working on prime numbers, okay, prime of primes and all of those kind of things. And he realized that he was getting an error. So every processor has something called a floating point processor as well. So it does the decimal calculations. And actually there was a bug in the processor. And he reported back to Intel. And of course it wasn't, the story as portrayed here is a very short one. But yeah, there was a little bit of back and forth. But Intel decided that they're going to recall the processor. And in 1994, we're talking about a $500 million hit that the company had to take for this recall. Now, you've got to remember, while there is a lack of trust that's coming about, as a buyer, as somebody who wants to go and do business, transact business with another organization, wouldn't you want to go and transact with an organization where there is a high degree of trust in the brand and the organization, what they stand for, what they do? And therefore, at times, you have to go and take these decisions, and you have to take these business calls at great financial impact to make sure that trust in your brand, trust in your organization, trust in your products is really retained in the audiences. And this is a great example of how Intel went and did it. And while there have been numerous cases that you hear now of, automobile recalls and all of that, it all started off with the same concept, that, we value our brand, we value our customers, and it's all right to acknowledge and say, I made a mistake. Yeah, if I were to go back here, I think one of the key things, sorry for going back on the slide, admit mistakes. Now, that's such a big issue. And as organizations, as professionals, as business leaders, we all need to have the ability and the trust and the faith in our own intents that we should be able to do that. Another interesting example, how trust builds great businesses is Grameen Bank of Bangladesh, and all of you know about Grameen Bank, I'm sure. Dr. Yunus was given the Nobel Prize on this one. And I think it started basically on a trust-based loaning system. And I think there is another very interesting example which has been carried out recently in South Africa, I think, where, their entire, so they don't do any credit checks or anything. It's a trust-based financing model. And believe you me, their NPAs are much lower than what we see around in a lot of organizations. The collection rates are much better than a lot of organizations. Their outstandings or, money in the market is much lower than any other organization. So great example of how you could build great organizations purely on the basis of trust. And I think these are the kind of behaviors that one needs to exhibit. And here is one last example of, how do you make sure that you are able to do. Please remember that people, end of the day, while we all want our salaries, we all want more pay hikes, and we want our paycheck to get bigger. But somewhere all of us at an intrinsic level, at a subliminal level, want to work and contribute to something bigger in life. Not just to go home, go to work, come back every evening and, spend 35 years of your life doing that, and then you retire and then one day the light goes off. We all want to do something better. And here is an example of somebody who actually did that. Yeah, I think great examples of how do you make sure that, the supposedly not-for-profit initiatives should also be, in my mind, have a profitability aspect. I don't think there is anything which you should be doing. There are exceptional situations where you may want to do it. But here is another example of how greater purposes can be built and great profitability can be built in the example of Mr. Ravi Chande. So I think trust is the glue, is the foundation on which you can go and do all these things. The issue is, this is very simple, right? I mean, you may wonder what is S and E and R. So S is simply strategy, E is execution, and R is results. Yeah. But please remember, people follow leaders they trust and not the strategy that they have. And it's great to have an awesome strategy, but if you have poor leadership with low trust, your results will be pathetic. Okay. And if you add the element of trust, just think of what the business results would be. So even if your organization is successful today, delivering great results, awesome performance, if you could up the level of trust in your organization, your results will show exponential impact. Now, this is where there is a clear trust dividend. What happens in business is that you look at business requires speed, higher speed, velocity, right? I mean, especially in a lot of businesses, it's the velocity of business that matters a lot. And you have to keep costs down. And if there is high trust, then the speed is high and cost is low, but the converse also happens. When trust goes down in an organization, speed comes down and cost starts going up. Now remember, when that starts happening, profitability will start dropping. So you're going to decide which side of this whole equation you are in. Are you in the trust dividend phase or are you in the trust tax phase? Because that's a huge cost that you're having to pay in your organization. And I think leadership in your organization is to be cognizant of this fact that we need to constantly work on this. And there are, like I showed in that pyramid of the triangle, lots of ways of doing very, very simple things to start building up trust in the organization. Now, very clearly, organizations where trust levels are higher, so 10% improvement in trust yields to a 35% increase in people's pay. Just a 10% improvement in the trust level of an organization. Wouldn't we all want better paychecks, right? And that's the dividend. So I think look around you in the world, there are lots of leaders who do very interesting stuff. Uh, Controversies withstanding, these are great examples. You know, the interesting thing, I was reading an article on Mr. Warren Buffett, the second gentleman in your picture on the screen. It said very interestingly that, you know, if life were so simple, Mr. Warren Buffett actually declares where he's investing and, you know, what is his holding in different companies. But the surprising thing, how many people have been able to actually achieve what kind of wealth he's created with his investment strategies. But yeah, I mean, you know, there is so Mr. Warren Buffett and I'm forgetting the name of the gentleman who is his closest friend. They do an annual lecture. Okay, just once a year uh, they talk to people and they talk about what is important to them. And yeah, it's called Charlie's Almanac. There is a book called Charlie's Almanac if you want to read. So the other gentleman is Charlie. And this dinner is like priced at $100,000 a pop. And people go and listen to them. And that's the kind of value that trust brings. I think that's really very, very important. Trust, again, is something which requires a fair bit of introspection. What can we do better? How do we do the right things? How do we not get lured by the shortcuts that may be there in the world around us? And please don't mistake me from the facts of as suggesting that, you know, the longer way is always a better way. It might not be the case. But I think somewhere our true north, yeah, our moral compasses should be pointing in the right direction. And as long as the moral compass is in the right direction, we'll start building a higher degree of trust in your organizations. So that's really what I wanted to share with you in terms of what is the business case for trust, what is the simple things that you could do in terms of building trust in the organization. And that's really all about, you know, I usually don't spend too much time talking myself. I love doing the Q&As. But I think today we will not be doing the Q&As, but I would still love to hear from you in terms of your thoughts on this, your questions, any doubts that you have, and my commitment to you is that I'm going to come back and answer each and every one of those questions. So that brings me to an end of what I wanted to share with you. Absolute pleasure, as always, being here, and I look forward to your revert on the questions that you may have, and I will come back to you personally on each one of those. Please also remember this presentation and the webinar is going to get hosted. It's being recorded and it's available on the CII website as well. So in case you want your colleagues or somebody else to listen to it as well, you could refer them to the same as well. With that, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here with you. You guys have a great day ahead and a super awesome weekend tomorrow day after. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.